In the memorial park on the site of the former Sofa Superstore, 9 granite plaques lie in the grass. Each one bears a name, an age, and a date. June 18, 2007. Here once stood a furniture store covering 3 square miles. It was a typical commercial building on a busy highway, where families bought furniture for their homes. On June 18, 2007, it became the site of the largest loss of life for firefighters in the United States since the September 11th attacks. 9 Charleston Fire Department employees died while fighting a fire that lasted 38 minutes. The official cause of the fire has never been determined. It is believed to have been caused by a discarded cigarette. But what investigators discovered during their investigation turned an ordinary tragedy into a story of systemic failures at all levels. On June 18, 2007, at around 7 p.m., an unidentified person threw a lit cigarette into a trash can near the loading dock of Sofa Superstore. That is the official version. But investigations by 3 federal agencies were unable to determine the exact source of the fire. This uncertainty became symbolic of the entire case. Too many questions remained unanswered. Too many coincidences came together in a deadly combination. Why did city fire safety inspections stop in 1998? Who decided that an 18,000 square foot building did not need a sprinkler system? Why were illegal additions containing combustible materials built over the years without intervention from the authorities? The answers to these questions are buried in bureaucratic procedures, technical regulations, and human negligence. But the result of all this was predictable and inevitable. Sofa Superstore was the perfect setting for a catastrophic fire. All that was needed was a spark. Sofa Superstore was located near Savannah Highway, a wide commercial artery that connects downtown Charleston with the suburbs. It is a typical American shopping area with supermarkets, car dealerships, and fast food restaurants. The flow of cars here does not stop from morning until late at night. The store building stood out for its size. It had a tall facade with large windows displaying rows of furniture. To passing motorists, it looked like a single structure. In fact, the complex consisted of several buildings connected to each other in the 1990s. The main building was constructed as a supermarket in the 1950s. After it was purchased by Sofa Superstore, 2 official extensions and a large warehouse were gradually added. Each section was considered by the city authorities as a separate building, which made it possible to avoid installing a sprinkler system. By law, no part of the building reached the size requiring automatic fire extinguishing. But the real problems began after the official extensions. A loading platform and 2 workshops for furniture repair were added to the complex without obtaining permits from the city. These were lightweight structures made of wooden frames and sheet metal. Inside were paints, solvents, and combustible materials. Everything that turns a small fire into a disaster. The interior layout created additional hazards. The showroom was crammed with furniture and had narrow aisles. The warehouse had high shelves reaching the ceiling. Some exits were locked or blocked by containers. The last fire safety inspection was carried out in 1998. After that, regular inspections ceased for unknown reasons. For almost 10 years, violations accumulated, remaining unnoticed by the authorities. By June 2007, all the factors had come together. No sprinklers, excessive fire load, blocked exits, and combustible materials in illegal extensions. It was a powder keg waiting for a spark. On June 18, 2007, 43 firefighters were on duty at the Charleston Fire Department, spread across several stations. 9 of them would not return home. Among them was Mike Benke, a 20-year veteran and father of 2. His 18-year-old son, Hunter, was planning to go to college, and Mike dreamed that his son would choose any profession except firefighter. "It's too dangerous," he would repeat. At the other end of the age spectrum were 27-year-olds Michael French and Brandon Thompson, young and ambitious, with 5 years of experience and plans for the future. The most experienced was 56-year-old James Drayton, with more than 30 years of service, who was planning to retire soon. Louis Malky, 34, combined his service with coaching at a local school. His basketball team was preparing for an important game. The other four, Captain William Hutchinson, engineers Bradford Beatty and Mark Kelsey, and firefighter Melvin Champagne, were experienced middle-aged professionals, each with their own history, family, and plans for the evening. These 9 men were part of a system that, in 2007, still lived by the traditions of the past. The department used aggressive tactics, rapid entry into burning buildings to suppress the fire. This worked for house fires, but it carried deadly risks in large commercial buildings filled with synthetic materials. None of them knew that day that they were responding to a call that would become the deadliest in their careers. June 18, 2007. The air temperature in Charleston was around 78.8 degrees Fahrenheit. A typical warm evening for South Carolina. Traffic was heavy on Savannah Highway as people returned from work. At that time, an unidentified person threw a burning cigarette into a trash can near the loading dock of Sofa Superstore. The fire started in the wooden structures of an illegal extension where flammable materials were stored. The smoke was first noticed by a passerby. His identity has not been established. He immediately called emergency services and went into the store to warn the employees. There were 6 people in the building, 5 in the showroom and 1 in the workshop. 1903. The response time was 3 minutes. 4 fire crews arrived at the scene. Initial assessment of the situation. A local fire in the loading area. Standard operation. The commander decided on a 2-pronged attack. One group was to attack the fire from outside via the loading platform. The second team was tasked with entering the showroom to check the evacuation and attack from the inside. 5 store employees evacuated on their own after an unsuccessful attempt to extinguish the fire with handheld fire extinguishers. 1 employee remained in the workshop at the rear of the building, unaware of the developing fire. A few minutes later, the team attacking from outside encountered intense fire and high temperatures. The team in the showroom began laying a hose line through the sales floor. The dense arrangement of furniture made it difficult to move around and lay the hoses. 10 minutes later, the situation began to deteriorate. The fire spread from the loading area to the showroom. The smoke became thicker and visibility decreased. The temperature inside the building rose. One of the hoses outside burned through due to the high temperature. A little later, conditions in the showroom continued to deteriorate. Visibility dropped to almost 0. Firefighters were forced to put on breathing apparatus and navigate using hose lines. Water pressure was insufficient due to the long distance to the nearest hydrants and problems with laying lines across the roadway. 23 minutes after the operation began, the remaining employee in the building called 911 from the workshop where he was trapped. He reported that he was trying to break through a metal wall with a hammer, but to no avail. Part of the team was redirected to rescue this person. They had to overcome a blocked gate and use power tools to break open the metal wall of the workshop. The rescue operation took several critical minutes. Half an hour after the fire started, the employee was successfully evacuated. This was the only positive outcome of the entire operation. At the same time, conditions in the showroom reached a critical point. Half an hour after the start of the operation, a critical situation developed in the Sofa Superstore showroom. 9 firefighters were inside the building in conditions of 0 visibility and rising temperatures. The dense arrangement of furniture created a maze in which it was easy to lose one's bearings. Firefighters followed the hose lines, using them as guides in complete darkness, but the hoses became entangled between pieces of furniture, further complicating navigation. Air supply became a problem. Standard breathing apparatus cylinders are designed for 30 to 45 minutes of operation, but under stressful conditions, air consumption increases. Some firefighters began to run out of air. The command faced a classic dilemma. Standard tactics dictated continuing the aggressive attack, but conditions inside the building indicated that personnel needed to be evacuated. 5 minutes later, the situation became critical. Firefighters inside the showroom began colliding with each other in the smoke. Some lost their bearings completely. Reports came in of low air levels in the cylinders. Under these conditions, the decision was made to break the large display windows at the front of the showroom. The goal was logical: to improve visibility, lower the temperature, and create additional escape routes. 38 minutes after the fire started, the display windows were broken. In the first few seconds, this did improve conditions. The smoke partially dissipated and visibility increased. One firefighter managed to escape through a broken window, but the influx of fresh air proved to be a fatal mistake. Thousands of pieces of furniture emitted gases as they burned, which accumulated under the ceiling like an invisible bomb. The oxygen coming in through the broken windows became a detonator. What firefighters call a flashover occurred, the instantaneous ignition of the entire room. The room turned into a furnace. The temperature jumped to 1,292 degrees Fahrenheit. Everything caught fire at once. The air became molten fire. Several firefighters managed to escape through the main entrance in the final seconds. They suffered burns but survived. 9 of their colleagues remained inside. 6 were in the main part of the showroom. 3 in the western section of the building. The fire completely engulfed the building. No one could go inside for a rescue operation. All attempts were called off for safety reasons. All 9 firefighters died in the line of duty that evening. The firefighting operation continued for several more hours, but most of the building was destroyed. Their bodies were not recovered until the ashes had cooled. After the tragedy, the search for the truth began. 3 federal agencies, NIST, NIOSH, and ATF, launched a massive investigation. Each sought answers to its own questions. What happened? Why did the firefighters die? And who was to blame? 6 years later, in 2013, NIST published its final verdict. Experts conducted computer simulations, reconstructed every minute of the tragedy, and analyzed the debris from the building. Their conclusion was ruthlessly accurate. Superstore was a perfect death trap. The building violated fire safety principles at every level. The lack of sprinklers allowed the fire to spread unchecked. Illegal additions with combustible materials turned the loading area into a fire accelerator. Narrow passages between furniture became a maze of death. Blocked exits cut off escape routes. The ATF spent months searching for the source of the fire, but the exact cause could not be determined. Arson was ruled out. So was technical failure. Only one option remained: a carelessly discarded cigarette. But by whom, when, and where exactly? These questions remained unanswered. A criminal investigation was conducted in parallel. The South Carolina Department of Law Enforcement spent 3 years studying the case, looking for evidence of a crime. In 2010, the investigation was closed without charges. No intentional violations that could have led to imprisonment were found. Store owner Herb Goldstein avoided criminal charges. Civil lawsuits against him were not publicized. The only gesture was a $100,000 donation to a fund for the families of the firefighters who died. The lack of punishment became a painful issue for the city. 9 heroes were dead, and no one was held responsible. The legal system was unable to find a specific culprit for the tragedy, which was the result of multiple systemic failures and human error. Justice proved more difficult than finding the truth. Investigations revealed an uncomfortable truth. The problem was not with a single building, but with the system that created it and was supposed to protect it. In 2007, the Charleston Fire Department was living in the past. Firefighters were using 1980s tactics to fight 21st century fires. Aggressive attack tactics worked in residential buildings, but became suicidal in large commercial buildings filled with synthetic materials. Chaos reigned at the scene of the fire. 2 groups of firefighters operated independently, one outside, the other inside the building, without a single commander. Everyone was shouting on the same radio frequency, creating a cacophony instead of coordination. Command did not understand what was happening inside the showroom until it was too late. Firefighters were not prepared for what they encountered. They had not been trained to recognize the signs of flash fires. There were no written procedures for working in buildings with high fire loads. The equipment, breathing apparatus, hoses, communications, was outdated. Even water became a problem. The nearest hydrants were 2,600 feet away. Hoses crossed the road, where they were run over by cars, disrupting the water supply. Simple logistical issues became deadly obstacles. The culture of heroic firefighting left no room for retreat. Firefighters were raised on the idea that a true hero never gives up. But sometimes, retreat is not cowardice, but wisdom. The Charleston firefighters had not yet learned this lesson. Chief Rusty Thomas resisted change even after the tragedy. He restricted federal investigators' access to firefighters, which led to a conflict with the mayor. It seemed that the system was protecting itself rather than those who served it. Charleston's problems were not unique. Across America, fire departments were struggling with underfunding, outdated equipment, and a lack of modern standards. But it took the deaths of 9 people for these problems to become visible to everyone. The city authorities were also to blame. The cessation of inspections in 1998, the lack of coordination between services, illegal extensions that had been ignored for years. The system failed at all levels, from urban planning to firefighting tactics. 9 firefighters did not die in the fire. They were victims of the system they themselves defended. The deaths of 9 firefighters were a turning point for Charleston. Changes began with the resignation of Chief Rusty Thomas in November 2007. He was replaced by Tom Carr, who put personnel safety above heroic traditions. The city's fire department became a testing ground for reform. Modern procedures with clear criteria for retreat were introduced. A new command system with designated scene commanders was created. They switched to multi-channel radio communication. Thermal imaging cameras, powerful pumps, and modern breathing apparatus were purchased. But the most important change took place in people's minds. Firefighters were taught a new philosophy. Sometimes the best thing you can do for fire victims is to stay alive. Compulsory study of fire physics and the signs of a flash fire was introduced. Heroism without knowledge was no longer considered a virtue. The Charleston tragedy changed more than just one city. NIST issued new recommendations for sprinklers in furniture stores. States tightened building codes. Expert Gordon Rotley gave 40 presentations on the lessons of the tragedy, turning the Charleston case into required study material. The families of those who died coped with their loss in different ways, but the story of Hunter Benke became a symbol of continuity. In 2023, 16 years after his father's death, he graduated from the Charleston Fire Department training program. "I'm finishing what my father started," he said at graduation. The reforms proved effective. According to experts, the Charleston Fire Department has made great progress, but the price of that progress was too high. 9 lives for lessons that could have been learned without sacrifice. A memorial park now stands on the site of the Sofa Superstore. 9 granite plaques have been placed exactly where the firefighters' bodies were found. Each one bears the name, rank, and date of death. The park is open 24 hours a day, and people come here at all hours of the day and night. Every year on June 18th, a memorial ceremony is held in Charleston. Firefighters stand guard for 24 hours at the flagpole, which is lowered in mourning. Families, colleagues, and residents of the city bring flowers and stand silently at the plaques. In 2021, a new fire station was built next to the memorial. It is equipped with the latest equipment and serves as a training center for the entire department. Portraits of the 9 firefighters who died are displayed on the wall of the station. The story of the Charleston 9 has become part of American culture's remembrance of public safety heroes. Their names are mentioned alongside the victims of September 11th as symbols of self-sacrifice for the sake of others. But the main legacy of the tragedy is not the memorials, but the changes in safety systems across the country. Thousands of firefighters receive better training, modern equipment, and safer procedures thanks to the lessons learned from the deaths of their colleagues in Charleston. The exact cause of the fire at Sofa Superstore has never been determined. Somewhere in the trash near the loading dock, a cigarette discarded by an unknown person was smoldering. That small spark set off a chain of events that changed the American Fire Service forever. 9 heroes died in the fire, but their deaths provided answers that will save the lives of others. That is their immortality. That is their victory over the system that betrayed them.